Okay, Stefan, we're ready. Yeah.
Tskaltubo is located 15 kilometers northwest of Kutaisi, Georgia's second largest city. In Soviet times, Tskaltubo was one of the Union's largest spa towns, as I already mentioned. And this state-run system of health resource had in the 1970s approximately 6,000 sanatoria all over the Soviet Union, and they did preventative health institutions and boarding houses they had there, and every year they hosted about 13 million people. The slightly radioactive thermal springs at Tskaltubo, they operated as a health spa already in the late 19th century during Tsarist times. And between 1939 and 1955, the town received several complexes built in the style of Soviet neoclassicism, as can be seen on this foil here. And in a second wave of development in the 1970s, the town received further facilities and as well examples of Soviet classical modernist architecture. But as a result of the war in Abkhazia, about 10,000 of the approximately 250,000 Georgians who flew the conflict were accommodated in the sanatoria of Tskaltubo. As you can imagine, as they had been living in Abkhazia for several generations, they lost all their property there, and with the expulsion from their homes, and this left them certainly in an acute disadvantage when it came to rebuild their lives. I mean, every Georgian had to face this in the 1990s, but many remained living in the sanatoria until this year. And not only in Tskaltubo, as well in cities like Tbilisi, Batumi, and so on. And these refugees had to use all the resources of the setting. That means parks, once used for recreation, became grazing pastures and gardens, trees were felled, and as well as you can see here, tables, chairs, flooring from the dining halls, they turned into firewood and cooking wood as well. The refugees took everything they needed from the public areas of the buildings, as the Georgian state was not able to provide them with even firewood. And the families turned the balconies, for example, into kitchens. You have to imagine that there were only single rooms for these spa reasons, without any further things like cooking utilities, and then the balconies were turned into kitchens. And after Georgia's independence, Tskaltubo soon drew the attention of investors from abroad, who were aware of its Soviet-era history, and as well then of the potential as a tourist location. But initially, international notice fell on Tskaltubo through the activities of foreign NGOs due to the ongoing inability of the Georgian state to manage the refugee crisis, which became even worse in 2018 after the Second Ossetian conflict, which brought a lot of more IDPs into other parts of Georgia. And then for more than 2 decades, Tskaltubo was in a way like an open wound in Georgia. On the one hand, the city is a place of longing for memories for many people in Georgia, from a time when the Soviet society, with the end of the period of the Stalinist terror, allowed the citizens to recover in a way freely. And there is hardly a family in Georgia that does not have photographs of last trips to Tskaltubo in its store of memories. Children were born in Tskaltubo, people were healed, and Tskaltubo was in a perception of many Soviet citizens like the fulfillment in a way of the communist utopia of peace and prosperity. In 2012 then, the Georgian state commissioned a Swiss consultancy to draw up something like a feasibility study to bring all of the 22 former sanatoria on the market. And Firstly, the prices were ranging from something like 800,000 to 2 million of euros. But then the prices fell over half because it was clear that nobody could do anything with the properties because of the IDPs still living there in the buildings. And some of the sanatoria were purchased by real estate companies from outside of Georgia, which subsequently then sold them the properties again, and so on and so on and so on. And even journalists working on this issue, they don't really know who owns these some of the sanatoria up to today. And the whole project of establishing, in a way, Tskaltubo as a brand on the world's tourism market was relaunched in June 2018. And in the context of this already known partnership found, I had mentioned, and then they wanted to turn this in the biggest spa destination in Central Europe. It was called something like a reborn medical and wellness spa capital, the spa capital of Western Europe. And in 2019, as nothing had happened up to this time, then the Georgian Ministry of Tourism and Sustainable Development, they launched a new 6-point plan. And then it was written in the media that they offered to Bidzina Ivanishvili, the former Georgian president and very influential backer of the country's governing party, the rest of the buildings for 1 lari. As something like a small or simply a small expense on the paper to bring it into new use. And if you see the next foil, please. Here you can see a photography of Tskaltubo in the 1970s, just to get an idea of how large the buildings are. And in the center, you see the sanatoria of the minor sanatoria. And if you see the plan on the next page, then this sanatorium of the minors is placed at the top of the map. It's number 2. So you have seen these incredibly large buildings, and they are only a small part of the whole of Tskaltubo. Here you can see the numbers of the buildings that are still in quite a rebuildable shape in a way. 18 buildings, 4 of them can't be rebuilt anymore. They have to be destroyed. And I've published a few articles about these contexts just to draw attention to the difficult living conditions of the people in Tskaltubo. And generally speaking, you can say that the potential for success of Georgia's revitalization as a tourist destination in the fight against the ongoing poverty in the country, this success cannot be denied. There is some success, but as something like Soviet-era tourist towns, dark tourism as well, in the example of Tskaltubo, and large cities such as Tbilisi, Kutaisi, Borjomi, this tourism is visible, certainly. But the interests of the stakeholder groups, they are very often in opposition to those of members of groups like the IDPs. These IDPs in Tskaltubo, they have been in a way standing in the way of Tskaltubo's tourist transformation, because these buildings could be sold in a way. And then the European Union, they financed a lot of buildings just around Tskaltubo's, many florage buildings, and in the end, the plans only led to the idea of pushing the IDPs out of these buildings, giving them new spaces to live. But very often these new spaces to live, they were as well in a quite bad conditions, because the buildings were unfinished and people were just set in the buildings without having finished the buildings, and they were said to that they would have to finish them themselves, for example. And on the last page, you can see the next one, please. You can see something like a result of the analysis. If you make a comparison of existing new and planned objects, specialities and temporalities, stakeholder-generated definitions of the subject and the collectives involved in interviews and all the observation I have done, then you can see that it's possible to identify modes of segmentation with excluding and instrumentalizing facets. And these are very crucial. The IDPs, they stand in a way aside. They have been interesting for tourists during the last years, as you could go there in a way of practicing this dark tourism and get together with IDPs living under very precarious conditions. But all development led simply to the aim of pushing the IDPs out without taking care about what could the people work, how could the people change their social conditions, their economic conditions on themselves. And the interviews I conducted during the final phase of the research before Corona, they confirm in the end the distrust of the IDPs against the state. And there is an evidential fundamental belief among this group that all opportunities for oneself or one's children to experience state support, that they don't have any possibilities to accept that. And finally, they see that the city develops, will develop again, and there is no space for them inside these cities, and any expectations to, in a way, take part in this recreational processes for which these spa cities were built during Soviet Union. They died with the Soviet Union, and Tskaltubo is in a way an example for that. Thank you very much. With this, I would end. And thank you very much, and I hope that I could give you a little insight in the processes there.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you very much. We're moving to the second presentation by Dimitris Kadaiftis and Tassos Grigorakis. Dimitris is here with us. Tassos, I hope, is online. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. So the
I hope that you can hear me, don't you?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay, that's perfect.
The title of the paper is Between Local and Transnational Neighborhoods of Post-Soviet Greeks in the Search for Cultural Affinity. Dimitris is one of ours, as we call it. He's teaching here at our graduate and postgraduate programs. He has a PhD from University. Just a moment. Okay. He has a PhD in history and anthropology, from where he said. And he is a researcher doing research on the post-Soviet space, on various issues of Greek diasporas, and not only.
What Soviet Greek diaspora?
Okay, good. And Tassos is also educated in France. He has a PhD from Paris, Vincent Saint-Denis, in sociology. He has taught sociology in Sorbonne Paris Nord, and he did a postdoc at the University of Macedonia. We are very pleased to have him as a member at our lab. So, Dimitris.